Welcome to the Prospective Doctor podcast, brought to you by Med School Coach. Premed and medical students alike are encouraged to tune in each week for tips on how to become a strong med school candidate, gain acceptance into the school of your dreams, and succeed on your journey toward residency and becoming a doctor.
Hello, everyone. I'm super excited for this week's guest. We have Dr. Jenny Wong. I'm going to give her a moment to introduce herself.
Well, thank you for having me on your podcast. So I'm currently at UC Davis, where I'm a dermatology resident, and I'm in my first year. And a little bit of background, I grew up in Chicago, where I did my undergrad, and then I went to New York for medical school. And then while applying for residency, I did 2 research fellowships, and then matched at UC Davis, where I'm now.
Perfect. That sounds like a lot of traveling from coast to coast, New York to California. My question for you is, had you always planned to go into dermatology?
Yeah, dermatology was definitely something that was on my radar for a while. I grew up with really bad acne, and I've always had eczema, so I've had a lot of interactions in dermatology offices. So it was something I was more familiar with. But starting med school, I started to realize just how competitive the field was. And so I didn't really want to put all my eggs in one basket. So I did really try exploring other specialties. Something I was really interested in was actually OB-GYN. I was like the president of the OB-GYN group in med school. And I also really liked psych. During my rotations, that was something that really stood out to me. And so, unfortunately, I think this is the case with a lot of med schools, but we don't actually get much exposure to dermatology in our curriculum. So it was something that I just knew I had an interest in. And when I would shadow doctors and dermatologists, I always loved just what they saw. But I didn't feel like I had any research opportunities or any opportunity to really get to know faculty members or really get to know the field in an intimate level. And so that's why I ended up doing a research fellowship to really explore that option even more.
Do you think for someone who is a student now and they're strongly considering dermatology that they would need to have a lot of research experience in order to match into the field, or is that something you just wanted to explore more for your application?
I do think that having research is very helpful, and I would probably say pretty vital to your application. And the reason being, it's because it's not one of the core fields that we are exposed to in med school. So if you're not doing research, you're really not getting to know the field at all. And research allows you to form connections with mentors, and it allows you to find maybe an area that you're more interested in. And without that, I just don't know how you'd be able to stand apart from other applicants when you are applying. That being said, I do think there are several ways to stand out. Not everyone has taken a research year. Not everyone has, 20 plus publications. But I do think that you need something in your application that shows you've dedicated some amount of interest and investment into dermatology. And I think research is kind of the easiest way to do that, but it's and I think at this point, you probably need at least a case report or 2.
That makes a lot of sense, especially you bringing up a good point, as you had a lot of exposure to other extracurriculars, like you were the president of the OBGYN club and things like that. But there isn't a lot of exposure to dermatology. Personally, when I was in medical school, it was an elective. So I didn't think that I wanted to go into dermatology, and I didn't. So I never took a derm rotation, whereas my friends and colleagues who were interested, they filled their fourth year with different ones. So, and then the fourth year is the time when you are doing all of your applications and things. So it may be good to get that exposure earlier on so that you can boost up your application. Speaking of applying and things like that that happen in the fourth year, a lot of students recently went through the match process as it happens each March. And you have a blog where you're very transparent about your experience and your journey through medicine. And you have expressed your first experience with the match process. Can you share with the listeners out there what happened in 2018 during your match week?
Yeah. So when I applied my year, I had already done one research fellowship. And I actually thought that I had a pretty strong application going to the match process. I think overall, my grades were pretty good. I was in good standing in my class. And the main thing that I thought I was lacking was research. And so I ended up taking this basic research year where I did basic science research. And actually, I wasn't able to publish that much, mainly because it was a very longitudinal project. And that's often the case with basic science projects. But going into the match, I was a little bit nervous about that aspect. But I ended up having, a handful of interviews, quite a few. So, logistically and just statistically, I thought I had a very good chance of matching. So when that Monday came and I found out I didn't match, I was very devastated. I was completely caught off guard. And it forced me to really scramble. And I reached out to pretty much everyone I knew in the dermatology process, including all the faculty members I had interviewed with during my cycle, just my research mentors. And it's a pretty frantic process. And I think I would not wish it upon anyone because there's really no guidebook to it. You're hustling. You're just frantically making calls, hoping someone responds to your emails. I really didn't sleep much that week. And so I also didn't really, I kind of participated in the SOAP, but I think early on I knew that I didn't really want to SOAP into a program that wasn't dermatology. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, I was just looking for research fellowships. And luckily, I was super lucky that one of the fellowships I reached out to at UC Davis responded back, and they heard my story. I sent them my resume, what had happened to me, and they liked me enough to give me a phone call, and I ended up chatting with one of the faculty members there, Dr. Mavrakis, who is absolutely wonderful. And he really took a chance on me. He heard my story and he knew how difficult and how devastated I was. And he was like, hey, why don't you come over to California? I know you're in New York, but why don't you do a few months here and just reapply this upcoming cycle? And I was actually really excited to hear that because a lot of other research fellowships would have wanted me to either graduate with an MD. I was still a med student then, mm-hmm. and maybe do like a postdoctoral, fellowship, maybe reapply in like 1 to 2 years. And that was just something that was so unpredictable and felt really scary, delaying reapplying for another 2-3 years, especially when med school is already so long. Mm-hmm. So I felt really comfortable with this research mentor, and I think that's really important. You really have to find people you can trust, and I did take a gamble. So I moved all the way out to California, and I ended up doing this research fellowship, which paid off in spades. I worked my little butt off during the fellowship year, but I really tried to kind of readdress the deficiencies and flaws in my application in the first cycle, and really try to come back harder, and was lucky enough to end up matching at UC Davis. So it definitely can happen, but it's a very tough process. So I feel for anyone who's going through something similar.
I appreciate your transparency because, as you mentioned, it's definitely a process. And for our listeners out there, we have students who are pre-med students and med students. So I'll just explain a little bit about what match day is. So you all know, like when you get into medical school, we're all equals and we take all of the coursework and do all of the rotations that you're required to do in order to graduate. And then through the process of going through all of the different rotations and learning about different specialties, you are told to pick what you would like to do because you get a taste of everything. So you pick what you want to do for perhaps the next 30 years. And then there is a process because there are so many students and only a certain number of residency positions where students do an interview process kind of similar to what you do to enter medical school, but a little different because they want to know why you would be a good fit, not only as a doctor, but for your respective field. And it's a process of a few months over the winter. And then at the end of the season, everyone who wants to apply for a first year residency position goes into some kind of online platform where they submit their rank lists, all due on the same day. And then it's left to a computer algorithm that matches your rank list with the computer algorithm from the programs. And it's kind of like a luck of the draw. So there are very qualified candidates who may not end up in some of their top choices, or as we just discussed right here, may not get a spot at all because there are so many different variable factors. So it's a very stressful process, needless to say. So you guys should definitely research that. And to just talk a little bit about the numbers, like I said, there are very qualified, great candidates. Of course, they're qualified like they're graduating from medical school, and you all are very intelligent. But this year in 2021 was one of our toughest matches where 42,508 people submitted preferences in that match algorithm thing. And of that, there were only 38,106 positions available. So there were way more people applied than there were even positions. And that's if everyone specifically fit into one for one a role. And of that, only 36,179 were filled. So there were a lot of students. So if you've only filled 36,000 out of 42,000, there are a lot of students who are in that same position. So there is a process when you don't match. It's called match week. You find out if you match on like that Monday, and then on Friday you find out where you match. So if you find out you don't match, you can go through another process they call I don't know what they call it. They call it the soap. Yes, they call it the soap process. And you can talk to different programs and try to resubmit. And a lot of people do get spots through there, but it may not necessarily be in a place you want to go or even the field that you had decided that you wanted to go. So what Jenny was explaining is that she utilized her resources and her gift of communicating well and showing what she wanted, and her skills of doing the research and stuff like that to advocate for herself, to find and set herself up for success. So I really commend you for that. But as you mentioned, it was very stressful. Have you met any other students that had not matched?
I have actually. I after I wrote that blog post, that a lot of students reached out to me afterwards, telling me about their own stories.
Mm-hmm.
And since I was applying into dermatology, I ended up knowing a lot of students who didn't match into dermatology. And so a lot of them really shocked me because they're really well qualified students who deserve to match. They could be a great dermatologist, but it just doesn't work out. And it is a numbers game, like you mentioned. There just aren't enough spots, and there are applicants, and so that's kind of the sad truth. But it happens, but no one talks about it. So I think it's super stigmatized. But I think if more people are open about it, then it's not so scary. Because there are ways to kind of get through it, but everyone just kind of does it in secret or in private, or it's really shameful. And I think that's really sad, and we should try to address that.
I totally agree. I think that it is something that we should talk about. And that's why I really was appreciative about your transparency, because it is something that people kind of brush under the rug or don't want to talk about again. And I've had several friends who have not matched. And one of my friends, we just had a celebration for him because he's been applying for 6 years and finally matched this year after 6 years of trying. So for those out there who may have Jenny's story and it may work out immediately, that is wonderful. That is what we want. But for those who may have to try more than once, there is hope out there. It's just figuring out how to create a plan and finding those mentors and that support system that can help you work through it.
Yeah, totally agree.
At Med School Coach, we know that getting into medical school is hard. In fact, 60% of pre-meds who apply to medical school don't even get accepted. And if you want to get accepted into a top medical school, it's even harder. It's a complicated process, and even students with great grades and MCAT scores get left out. That's why more students than ever are turning to Med School Coach for admissions advising. Our advisors are all physicians and former admissions committee members, so they know exactly what medical schools are looking for. One-on-one admissions advising from Med School Coach makes all the difference. Our expert team will help you develop a game plan, prepare your application, edit your essays, and coach you for interviews. Every pre-med has a story, and we'll help you tell it so you can stand out from the crowd. Visit us online at medschoolcoach.com and use offer code PODCAST10 to save 10% up to $400 on a Med School Coach admissions advising package. You can achieve your medical school dreams, and Med School Coach can help.
I'm glad that we talked about that, and I'm sure that if the students have questions, they can reach out. We'll talk about ways to reach out to you or look at your blog. Okay. But let's get a little more into this dermatology. So what is your favorite part about dermatology residency?
I will say, though, that dermatology is just very fun. And one thing that I love about residency is that we have a really regular schedule. It's mainly outpatient, which means we're seeing patients in the clinic. So our hours are like 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., and we get our weekends off. So I think it's great for work-life balance, and that was something that was really important to me. So there's that. And the other thing about dermatology is that you're pretty much seeing patients from the entire spectrum, from babies to, young people, college students, up to, your old grandmas and grandpas. And they can be really healthy and really sick, and you're really seeing them at all stages of life. And that's something I really love. And you can really just help them. They're usually very motivated to kind of address their skin issues. Obviously, there are some who aren't as much, but I think overall you feel you feel very gratified at the end of the day, because you definitely helped out at least a few of your patients, and so that's kind of nice. I really enjoyed that.
I love that, because it's kind of like my field, I guess, almost family medicine, where you kind of take care of people from the cradle to the grave. And for those listeners out there who haven't done their pathophysiology yet, like, the skin is the largest organ of the body. So, and it's connected to so many different disease processes. So sometimes you can just look at a lesion and you'll be like, oh, do you have sarcoidosis or something like that? So it's very fascinating, and it's something that people may need to take a closer look at. And even if you decide not to go into dermatology, it's also great to kind of pay attention, or maybe even take an elective when you're in medical school, because it's something that you'll use in almost every field.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do. Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that not many med schools do place an emphasis on dermatology in the curriculum. But, I would totally encourage everyone to really check it out. See if there's any shadowing opportunities. And even if there's maybe like a dermatology consult service in the hospital, just to see what it's all about. Because if you don't know, then you don't know, and you may never go into it. And I think that would be a shame.
Absolutely.
Supporting the field, yeah. Mhm.
So you've given us so many different pearls of wisdom. What is one piece of advice you would have for both pre-medical students and medical students at the start of their journey that you wish that someone had told you?
I think definitely learn how to be your own advocate, and like learn how to pick yourself back up.
Mm-hmm.
I think going through med school and even just through college, just being a pre-med and then wanting to apply into residency, you learn how to do well, and you're kind of expected to do well. But when things don't go well, I think that's what people probably struggle a lot with, just learning how to overcome those challenges,
Mm-hmm.
and having kind of the grit and the motivation to really get through hard times, and to not give up when things get tough. When things go well, it's easy. You just study well and you get the grade that you want. But oftentimes that's not the case. You study and you don't get the grade you want. And learning how to really push yourself, to the best that you can be, and believing in yourself and having a little faith that you can do it, I think is so important. And so if I didn't have that, if I didn't believe in myself, and if I didn't have the motivation, to kind of get through failure, I wouldn't be where I was today. So I think that's really important. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Expect bad things to happen, and just know that it's a bumpy road. But if you can challenge yourself to get through it, then I think that's all you can ask for.
I think that that's amazing advice. Practicing ways to advocate for yourself is always important. Of course, many of you are all very smart, but when you get to medical school, you'll all be smart. You'll all be at the top of your class. So there are going to be challenges. And even if there aren't challenges academically, there are going to be challenges in life. So figuring out ways to bounce back and practice resilience and self-care and have faith in yourself are very important things. So I thank you for joining us today. Is there any last words that you have for the students, and can you share with them where that they can check out your blog?
Yeah, definitely. You can check out my blog at thevibrantmed.com, and you can always reach out to me there. You have any questions or any issues with not matching, I'm always happy to help out students. Sometimes life gets a little bit busy, but I do have a lot of great resources on there. And I would just say it's a process, and sometimes things don't always happen the way you expect them to, and that's okay. Med school and this whole medical journey, it's not always a linear process, and that's okay too. So just keep your eyes open, and keep your mind open, keep your heart open to just when one door closes, another one opens. I feel like I'm just saying all these cliches, but it's kind of true. It's not linear, and once you get into practice or start residency, you'll find that a lot of people come from all walks of life and have their own journeys and stories to tell. So I think that's kind of my.
You make total sense. Yeah, that like we talk about this journey of medicine, but the journey is the fun part. You're going to make some turns. You might even turn around, but you'll find your way, and that's the part that is going to make your story worth telling. Yeah. So thanks for coming on.
I think you said it a lot more eloquently than I did.
No, you made perfect sense. So, and we'd be happy to have you back anytime. And for the listeners out there, feel Feel free to check out the blog. We'll put the name of it and the links in our show notes. Feel free to subscribe to us, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.
At Med School Coach, we know that matching into the specialty of your choice and the residency program of your dreams has a dramatic impact on your career as a physician. And your USMLE score is the most important acceptance factor of all. That's why more students than ever are turning to Med School Coach for USMLE tutoring. Our tutors are all 260 plus scorers and have been through rigorous training. Plus, the average student who uses Med School Coach tutoring raises their score by 23 to 55 points. There is an enormous amount of material you need to know for Step 1 and Step 2, and Med School Coach can help you be smart about how to study. We'll create a custom program just for you. Then, we'll help you master USMLE concepts where you need help most. You'll raise your USMLE score. We guarantee it. Visit us online at medschoolcoach.com and use offer code PODCAST10 to save 10% up to $400 on a Med School Coach USMLE tutoring package. You can achieve your medical school dreams, and Med School Coach can help.
Each episode of the Prospective Doctor podcast is brought to you by Med School Coach. To access articles, videos, webinars, and free tools to help you succeed on your journey toward med school and beyond, visit our website, prospectivedoctor.com. We hope you tune in again next time.